Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Mm.
Today, we're going to get into something kind of different, a career path you might not expect. We're diving into the world of halal butchers.
It's a really fascinating blend of tradition and serious skill, but also, a real service to the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've got some really cool resources from RoleCatcher.com, they're a job platform,
Yeah.
and they seem to have it all. Career guides, even AI interview prep, the works. And luckily, they've got a ton on halal butchers, which is perfect because, well, that's what you're interested in, right?
Right.
So think of us as your guides to really figuring out what this whole career path is all about.
Yeah, we tend to think of butchers as, well, experts in meat, obviously.
Hmm.
But when you add in the whole halal element, it really brings in a whole other layer of responsibility.
And before we even get too far into this, maybe we should define halal, just for anyone who might not be familiar.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So halal basically means permissible in Arabic. And in this case, we're talking about food and practices that are allowed, that are permissible under Islamic law. When it comes to meat being halal, there are really specific rules about like how the animal is raised, how it's slaughtered, and it's all about respect,
Yep.
minimizing suffering, stuff like that.
So it's about way more than just what cut of meat it is, right? It's the whole process, making sure it's ethical from the beginning to the end.
Exactly, yeah. And that's where a halal butcher's expertise is so important. They don't just need to know the guidelines, they have to apply them perfectly every single day. It's a huge responsibility.
Seriously. Wow. I can see how much trust people would put in someone with that job.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the actual work. Like day to day, what does a halal butcher even do?
You might be surprised to hear it's not all behind the scenes stuff. You're not just chopping up carcasses all day. I mean, that is a big part of it. But there's actually a ton of customer interaction, building relationships, even management as you get further in your career. Think of it less like an assembly line and more like running a whole operation.
That's wild. I never even thought about that part of it. Rollcatcher's guide was saying a halal butcher is involved in every step,
Yeah.
from getting the meat to all the hygiene stuff.
For sure. Like, picture this. You start early, maybe go to the market or call up your suppliers to get the best meat. You're making sure it's all halal, building those relationships. Then back at the shop, it's all about preparing the meat, cutting it, trimming, grinding, all that, but also keeping everything super clean and organized.
And all while talking to customers, answering questions, even recommending cuts of meat and recipes and stuff.
Yeah. It's pretty fast-paced. Think about it. The smells, the sounds. You've got the spices, the cleaver hitting the cutting board, people talking about their families and their recipes. It's a whole sensory experience.
That's another thing Rollcatcher mentioned, how it's not just a job. It's like this really important part of the community.
Hmm?
Okay, so we talked about the ethics and what a typical day looks like. But what about moving up? Is it just butcher forever? Or can you grow in this job?
That was one of the coolest things I found looking through this stuff. It's not a flat career at all. You could start as like an apprentice, then you're a junior butcher, then senior butcher, and you might even end up managing a whole team as, get this, head halal butcher.
So there's a whole ladder to climb. That's kind of cool. I always figured it was more like you're a butcher, that's it. But it sounds like you can really move up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just about like how long you've been doing it. The RoleCatcher guide was talking about how a lot of halal butchers, they end up opening their own places.
It makes sense. You're building all these skills, meeting suppliers, getting to know customers.
Yeah.
It's kind of natural to want to do your own thing.
Totally. And you see that a lot in this field, people wanting to start businesses. But even if you don't go that route, there's still ways to move up. A lot of halal butchers, they'll get really good at specific cuts of meat, or they'll even get into recipe development, become experts.
So you got the actual craft, the customer stuff, the management angle, and then maybe even running your own place. It's way more diverse than I thought it would be. But say someone's totally new to this, just starting out. What would you tell them, based on what we saw in RoleCatcher?
That's a good question. I think number one is you got to understand how important it is to do things the halal way. It's not just memorizing some rules. It's really living those principles, Respect, hygiene, ethical sourcing, the whole 9 yards.
So integrity is a huge deal in this job.
Yeah, for sure. And you can't fake that. It has to be real, You got to understand it and respect it. On top of that, be ready to work hard, be ready to learn a lot, and don't be scared to get your hands dirty, literally.
That's good advice for any kind of cooking, really.
Uh-huh.
But let's talk about getting hired. RoleCatcher was saying they have these AI interview prep tools, which is kind of wild. How does that even work? Is it actually useful for this kind of job?
I know it does sound like sci-fi or something, but it's actually really practical. Imagine you've got like thousands of interview questions, right? All about being a halal butcher. That's what they give you.
So you're not just guessing what they'll ask. You can really get ready for anything.
Yep. And for halal butchery, it's super important to show you really know your stuff. So having good answers is key.
Yeah, because anyone can say they get it, but in an interview, you got to explain it clearly, especially when you're probably nervous anyway.
Exactly. And that's where these AI tools come in. They make you think about your answers, practice different situations, so you walk into that interview feeling way more ready and confident.
Like having an interview coach.
Yeah.
But like on your phone, that's pretty cool. All right, so you nailed the interview, got the job, you've been a halal butcher for a few years. What's next? Is this a stepping stone or is it like its own thing?
People ask that a lot. And the cool thing is the skills you get from this job, they can really apply to other stuff. It's not just meat, it's food safety, quality control, managing inventory, customer service, even some marketing and business stuff if you think about it.
You're right. I didn't even think about how that could be useful for other food jobs or even outside of food.
Right. So some people stay halal butchers, but it could also be like a starting point. Maybe you become a food inspector, making sure everything is good quality and safe. Or you use those people skills to get into management at like a grocery store or something. There's actually a lot of options.
Wow, it's like this hidden path to all these different things. That's really neat. One thing I've noticed through this whole deep dive is how much we talk about community. RoleCatcher mentioned it a lot too, but can you talk about that more? Like, what's the halal butcher's role in their community besides just selling food?
It's a big part of the job for sure. In a lot of communities, they see halal butchers as like trustworthy figures, almost guardians of tradition. They're not just selling something, they're doing something really important, helping people follow their cultural and religious practices.
It's a much deeper connection than just buying and selling.
It is. Think about it. Families depend on them to get food they're allowed to eat, food that fits with what they believe, that builds a trust and respect you don't see everywhere.
It's like they're part of the community.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be really fulfilling for the butcher and the people they're serving.
I bet.
Yeah,
It's more than just a business deal then. It's like supporting a whole way of life.
exactly. And that gives it a sense of purpose that you might not get from other jobs.
It's funny you mention that because RoleCatcher, they also talked about the global side of this. There was this one stat that really got me. They said the halal food market is going to hit almost $3 trillion by 2030.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it's massive.
That just shows you how much demand there is for this all over the world. As more people are looking for food that fits their beliefs, halal butchers are even more important.
It's like even with globalization and all that, food still matters for culture and religion.
For sure. And for people who follow halal, having a butcher they trust isn't just like a nice thing, it's really important to them.
Totally. It's been so interesting, like really breaking down this job. We talked about the skills, the ethics, the global stuff. It's a lot.
It shows you there's more to it than you might think.
Totally. And speaking of things we might not expect, RoleCatcher's guide ended on something I found really interesting. It talked about how important it is to keep learning.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Like you can't just know it all and be done.
Right. The halal food world is always changing. There's new technology, new ideas, new problems to solve. It never stops.
So even if you're already a great halal butcher, you got to keep up.
Absolutely. You have to keep learning new things, practice your skills, and stay up to date, or you get left behind.
It's like any craft, really. There's always something new to learn.
Exactly. And that's what makes you a real pro, always wanting to learn more.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive, and honestly, I have a whole new appreciation for what halal butchers do. The skill, the dedication, it's really impressive.
I'm glad we could explore this together. It's been great.
And for everyone listening, if you're feeling inspired, definitely go check out RoleCatcher. Their website's got tons on this career path, plus others. And they even have those AI interview tools we mentioned.
It's a great resource for anyone who's looking for a job or thinking about changing careers.
Couldn't agree more. So, whether you're thinking about becoming a halal butcher or just curious about the world, we hope this gave you something to think about.
And maybe next time you're at a halal butcher shop, you'll have even more respect for what goes into it. All that tradition and skill in every piece of meat.
Nicely put. That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains hungry for knowledge.